Maqasidic Tafsir.
Where should I begin when I'm starting at the end? Pursuing the higher aim, learning the meaning of every page. Where should I begin when I'm starting at the end?
Assalamu alaikum. Sunnahfollowers presents a new class, the Maqasidic Tafsir, being taught and brought to you by Ustada Layla Nashiba. Please stay tuned, streaming on all major platforms, right here on channel Sunnahfollowers.
Alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. I'd like to welcome everybody to our class entitled, this is our class, wait a minute, let me fix it. I see which class this is. This is the class, the Maqasidic, there it is, the Maqasidic Tafsir, and this is based on the book written by Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid. For those of you who have not yet purchased the book, please go to Amazon, the book, and get a copy of this book. This is the Maqasidic Tafsir, Volume 1. And last week when we met for this class, we talked about how the Quran interpreter, his job is to look at the issues that are facing the Ummah today, and in turn use the Quran as a means of providing an objective, then followed by goals and then solutions to whatever the problems are that's impacting us as a nation. And what we did last week is we used the objective of obedience, because living in the world today in 2024-25, a lot of Muslims suffer with bending the knee to Allah. We don't have a problem bending the knee to man. We don't have a problem bending the knee to jinn, but we do have a problem bending the knee to Allah. Allah is the only one worthy of worship. Obedience is to Him and Him alone, not to anyone else. So we took that as the objective, obedience, and we talked about how when it comes to Muslims struggling to obey Allah and His commands, what did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He taught us that for those people who are weak in faith, weak in practice, one of the best ways to train your soul to submit to Allah is by remembering death. Remembering death. And that's what he did. He used the Quran, the words of Allah from the Quran, as to what happens when we die and how we all will be held accountable, how Allah will cause our bodies to come back to life, and we will have to stand before Him to be judged for the choices we made in this world. So the Prophet Muhammad used death. He said, those of us who remember death often, these are the Muslims who are most likely to repent from their sins. These are the Muslims who are most likely able to control their desires and bend the knee to Allah. So that's what we spoke about yet last week. And we started it off with phase 1. Phase 1 in how to use the Quran as a means of calling the people to remember Allah through the form of death and submit. We talked about one of the great surahs of the Quran that addresses that, Surah An-Naziyat. and how and Nazia, these are the words of Allah sent, guaranteeing us, promising us that we will be brought back to life. So today we're going to continue using death as a means or as an objective, a Maqasidic objective to calling you to submit to Allah, and we'll continue with phase 2. And let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen, and we will be covering pages 177 through 184 of the book today. Inshallah, you guys should be able to see it here. Okay, hold on. Yeah, we'll be covering pages 177 through 184. We will be discussing phases 2 and phases 3 of the steps used by the Quran interpreter to help the Ummah to better its condition. And in this case, obedience to Allah, submission to his laws, through the reminder of death. So phase 2 and phase 3 focuses on identifying the verses of the surah that address death and the consequences of not submitting to Allah's laws. And also phase 3 consists of the evidence that's used as well. So let's take a look at it. Let's start off with phase 2. And again, phase 2 means gathering the evidence, gathering the pieces of evidence that will help to legitimize the objective of obedience to Allah through the reminder of death. And last week we identified the surah or the chapter of the Quran that the Quran interpreter would use in an instance such as this, which is Surah An-Naziyat. Okay? So again, the surah itself is the evidence, because as we discussed last week, this surah has many verses. The first 7 verses in particular details what happens at death, how we will be held accountable and called back to Allah. And also we talked about the evidence being that this surah was revealed. It's a Meccan surah. And being that it's a Meccan surah, it lets you know that this is a surah that Allah sent down to help the Muslims to develop their aqidah or their belief system. So many of you today, new shahadas, you're struggling with wearing hijab. You're struggling to stop smoking cigarettes. You're struggling to bend the knee to Allah and pray and fast. Well, this surah was revealed when the Prophet was in Mecca. It's one of the surahs that Allah sent down to develop the fear of him, to develop the fear of him in the hearts of those who believe. As we discussed last week, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you will never be a true believer until you love for the sake of Allah, hate for the sake of Allah, and also fear his punishment and have hope of his mercy. So this surah helps to develop that fear that we need, which will cause us to bend the knee and submit. Okay. Also, the subjects in this chapter, as we talked about last week, each verse relates to the topic of death or the objective of death. Each verse has something to say about death. And also, by pondering the meaning of those verses, that will help again to develop that pillar of faith, which is to submit to everything Allah says, to obey his commands. So that's phase 2 of the process. And again, hadiths are presented to explain the verses, explain this and all of that. So that's phase 2. So now phase 3, this is expounding upon, analyzing the concepts of death. In this case, the objective being to cause you to think about how your life can end at any moment, and how you don't want your life to end while you are in disobedience to Allah. You don't want to be caught with no hijab on. You don't want death to come find you with a cigarette in your hand. You don't want death to come knocking on your door while you fornicating. So that's what phase 3 of the process entails. And basically it entails understanding the process of death as presented to us through this surah of the Quran and all the hadiths that relate to it. So the 2 pieces of evidence proving that death can come at any moment, and when it comes, there's no coming back. And whatever sins we died upon, we will be held accountable. The 2 sources are the Quran, of course, and the hadiths. Listen to what Allah says in the Quran, in the interpretation of the meaning, and this is here in this surah. Allah says, by the pluckers, meaning the angels of death, when they violently pluck the souls of the unbelievers. You don't want to be caught as an unbeliever. You don't want to die as an unbeliever, because Allah details what happens. And then we have the graphic description of what happens should the angel of death come to you and you're not in good standing with Allah. That's through the hadith of Ibn Azib. And this is a very long hadith that I'm going to basically summarize for you. Ibn Azib, may Allah be pleased with him, he tells us that we were out with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam attending a funeral of a man amongst the Ansar who had just died. And when we reached the grave and the body was put inside it, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced the direction of the Kaaba, and we all sat down around him, and we sat so still and so quiet. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had in his hand a stick, and he was scratching the ground with the stick. And then he looked up at the sky, and then he looked back down to the ground. He did it 3 times. And then he said, indeed, the unbeliever, when he reaches the departure from this life and the arrival of the hereafter, angels who are harsh and severe, they will come down from the sky to him, and their faces will be dark, and they will have with them a burlap sack from the hellfire, and they will sit as far away from the deceased as the eye can see. And then the angel of death will appear, and he will sit beside the person's head, and the angel of death will say, "Oh, filthy soul, come out to the displeasure and the anger of Allah." And then the unbeliever's soul will then scatter, dispersing from his body, But the angel of death will rip it out. He will rip that soul out violently. And every angel, after he rips that soul out, he will then place that soul inside the burlap, filthy sack from the hellfire that he will have with him. And then he and the other angels will rise up with that soul towards the heavens. And as they rise up higher and higher, anytime they pass another angel, the angel will say, "Oh my goodness, what is that filthy smell?" Because they will be able to smell the filthy soul of the unbeliever who is in that burlap sack. And they will continue up through the heavens. And then when they reach that highest level, that person's soul will be written down in the book of the people who will be of the hellfire. And then after that person's name is written, the angels will release the soul from the burlap sack, and the soul will fall down hard, real hard, back to the earth, landing in its grave. Do y'all understand that? And again, time in the hereafter is nothing like the time in this world. By the time all this happens, your funeral will be over. They will have placed your soul in the grave. And then Allah will allow you to hear one last thing from this world. And that last thing that you will hear will be the footsteps of your family and your friends who walk away from your grave. So imagine this: from the moment you die and that angel of death pulls your soul, while your body is being washed, while the people are mourning and grieving over you, even if they got your body like James Brown on ice. Let's say in this world, they got your body sitting on ice for 10 months. That's how long it's going to take for your soul to be going up and up and up, and all the angels cursing it because of its smell. So even if it took 10 months for your body to be buried, even if it took 10 years for that body to be buried, that's how it'll seem like the blink of an eye for you. Because when they drop you, it's going to be a powerful, hard, painful drop. You will be dropped back down to the earth inside that coffin, inside that grave. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. Once Allah allows you to take your last hearing from this world of those footsteps leaving your grave, that's when two fierce, scary looking angels will appear. The hadith says black and blue in color. Another hadith says purple. Well, when you mix black and blue together, it turns purple. Two fierce angels will appear in your grave. One of them will have an iron bar in his hand, and they will ask you, who is your Lord? Even though you claim to be Muslim and you know the answer, but the fact that you died upon a sin of disbelief, that's why y'all got to be careful of those sins of disbelief. You died a person who was arrogant. You died a person who denied the signs of Allah. You died a person who took the laws of man over the laws of Allah, voting in elections and stuff. Anyone, even though you claim to be Muslim, the fact that you died upon a sin of disbelief, you didn't think it was fair that women had to cover up. So because you thought it was unjust, you didn't wear hijab. You didn't dress the way Allah said. That's a sin of disbelief now, because you denied. You outwardly and verbally denied and rejected what Allah said. You died looking like a kafir. You lived your life like a kafir woman, even though you claim, oh, my religion is Islam, but you were really a hypocrite. You picked and chose what laws of Allah to live and honor. So when those two angels appear, black and blue in color, and one of them holding an iron bar, they're going to ask you, who is your Lord? You will try to say Allah, but your mouth won't move. You'll be lying in that grave saying, but you won't be able to get the name Allah out. Even though you think you know the answer, it won't come out, because Allah is not going to allow it to come out. You were a hypocrite. You died upon a sin of disbelief. You died upon suicide. You took your own life, for example, too. Or you worshiped someone over Allah. You loved your children more than you did Allah. You allowed your son to sell drugs from out your house, even though you knew it was haram, but he's my baby. He's just a knucklehead. You allowed your daughters to have their boyfriends in your house. It's okay, she's just a knucklehead. Okay, your love for your children was more than Allah. This is a sin of disbelief. So you will sit there trying to say Allah, but it won't come out. You'll be going, So since you can't answer the question, the angel with the rod in his hand, he will take it and bash you in the head. And he'll bash you in the head, and you will scream so loud that every creature in the hereafter will hear you. That's why we Muslims are supposed to be buried in a Muslim graveyard, because if you're buried with kafirs, you will hear the kafirs screaming as they're being punished in their graves. And then that angel's going to ask you, who is this man? You would try to say Muhammad, but if you can't get it out, you'll go, And so that angel's going to bash you in your head again. And you're going to scream so loud that everything in the hereafter will hear you. And then they're going to ask you, what was your religion? You will try to say, I was a Muslim, I was Salafi. Oh, nobody want to hear that Salafi stuff now. You will sit there trying to say Salafi. It ain't going to come out your mouth. They going to bash you in your face, in your head, because you claim you was a Muslim, but you called other Muslims kafir. You went around referring to everybody as being a kafir because they didn't declare La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah ana Salafiyya. Because they didn't say that, they was a kafir. So who's the kafir now? So they gonna bash you. Yeah, adding things into this religion. That's another sign of disbelief, sin of disbelief. Making your own rules, making your own laws that contradict the law, telling people that unless they say ana salafiyya, and when they give shahada, their shahadas are not accepted. Oh yeah, you made that up yourself. That's a sin of disbelief. And then after that angel gets through bashing your head in, from those questions. It doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. Then an ugly man will appear in your grave, and he will sit close to you, and he will look at you. He will say, I represent your bad deeds. All the Muslims you went around calling a kafir because they didn't agree with you. All the people that you cursed because you chose an ideology that contradicts what our Prophet Muhammad came with. I represent your bad deeds. And then you will be told, look to your left. And what will appear to your left will be the burning fire of hell. And that ugly man will say, look to the left. That is your home in the hellfire. And then he will say, look to the right. And you will look to the right, and a door will open from paradise. And it will smell so good. The breeze will be so cool. And you will say, well, Ana Salafia, think you're going. And they'll say, hold it. Look what would have been your home in paradise. So we all have two homes. We all have a home in hell, and we all have a home in paradise. That ugly man will then say to you, that would have been your home in paradise. But since you died upon the sin of disbelief, because you allowed your scholars to make things lawful that Allah didn't make lawful, and you believe them over Allah, and you allowed them to make things unlawful that Allah didn't make unlawful, and then you allowed them to add conditions to this religion to call everybody kafir, unless they say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah ana Salafiyya. They will say, look to your real home. Your real home is right there, the hellfire. Now get ye in there. And you'll be dragged by your forehead and placed in that fire. And you will burn, baby, burn for eternity. That's the person that dies, an unbeliever. And I use this as an example to try to get you guys to fear Allah, speaking about this religion in the wrong way, saying that people adding conditions to this deen that Allah didn't add, and cursing other Muslims. And also this same hadith, the Prophet goes on to tell us about the good soul. He says when a person dies who is in good standing with Allah, their fate will be a little different. Okay, hold on. The person who dies in good standing with Allah, their fate will be a little different. What will happen to him, or what will happen to her as they are lying in their bed dying? Two angels will appear, one on their left, one on their right. The person will be afraid to die, because as human beings, we all fear death. But those two angels will tell you, calm down. They'll give you the strength to calm down. And then the angel of death will appear. And he will have in his arms a clean sack. And it will smell like perfume. And he will come and sit at your side. And he will say to you, come out, good soul. Come out to the pleasure of your Lord. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And then he will gently pull your soul. And then he will put it in that sweet smelling cloth. And then he and the other angels will carry your soul upwards. And every angel you pass will say, Subhanallah, what is that beautiful smell? What is that beautiful smell? And they'll carry you up to the highest heaven. And then your name will be written in the book of Allah, the book of the names of the people of paradise. And instead of dropping your soul back into the grave, those angels will bring your soul down gently, and they will lay you down in your grave. And Allah will cause you to hear the last thing from this world, which is the footsteps of your relatives as they walk away. And then those two fierce angels will appear, black and blue in color, one with the rod. You will be terrified to see them. But the two angels who brought you down, they will calm you down. They'll tell you, don't worry, don't be afraid. We're here, we'll help you. And those two black and blue angels will ask you, who is your Lord? And without hesitation, it'll come out. You'll say, Allah, Allahu Akbar. Then they will say, who is that man that you follow? You will say, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And they will say, what way did you die upon? And you will say, I died upon a straight path. I died upon the path of Islam. And then a handsome man will appear. And this handsome man will say, I represent your good deeds. He will say, look to the left of you. You will look to the left and you will see the ferocious fire of hell, and you'll become afraid again. He will say, that is your home in hell. And as you think you're about to lose it, he'll say, but look to the left. And then you'll look to the left and you'll smell this sweet fragrance. And he'll say, that's your home in paradise. And then that angel will say, sleep, sleep, sleep until your Lord rises you up. And then your soul will transform into the form of a beautiful green bird, and it will fly up to the heavens until the day of judgment. And your body will be in the grave in a state of sleep. That's for the person, the Muslim that died in good standing. But for that Muslim who died upon the sin of disbelief, your soul will be placed into the hellfire for whatever sin you died upon. You were one of those women who refused to cover up. You thought wearing a hijab, covering your body, was outdated. Oh, this is the 21st century. You will be naked. Your soul will be placed in a cauldron of boiling water. And in that cauldron will be prostitutes and adulterers, and they'll all be in there naked with you. And you'll be burning and screaming in between life and death over and over until the day of judgment. And you will feel everything. Your body will be squeezed in the grave, squeezed and unsquoze, squeezed and unsquoze, and you will feel every punishment. You will not be asleep. You will feel it all in that grave. The body, as the soul is being persecuted, because you chose to die upon a sin of disbelief. The Prophet Muhammad detailed this hadith. This hadith is in detail. It's in Sahih Bukhari, and also parts of it is in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet Muhammad didn't hold back. He told the truth. Like I said, the truth is a bitter pill to swallow. But those companions were better Muslims than any of us could ever be. When they heard those details of what happens in that grave, they didn't have a problem covering their bodies. They didn't have a problem praying their salats. They fasted Ramadan. They answered all the commands of Allah. They submitted without hesitation. They didn't go around asking for fatwas to get out of their obligations. They didn't go around asking, I'm a new shahada, can I take baby steps? The Muslim women didn't go back to their kafir husbands. They said, I'll eat dirt and live in the woods before I be with a non-Muslim man, because they feared Allah. Death. One of the greatest reminders is death, because it can come at any moment. And that's what the Prophet taught the companions. You have a problem submitting to Allah's commands, think about death. If you a true believer, that hadith I just detailed, it'll scare the heck out of you. It'll make you cover that naked body up. It'll make you get up and make those prayers and hope you don't slip and fall and bust your head open and die in the process. So that's phase 1, 2, 3 of how the Quran interpreter uses the Quran as a means of trying to get the people to change the condition of themselves. When we meet for this class in 2 days, we're going to talk about the last step. I'm using death. I used marriage and divorce as an example last time. I'm using how death can spur you to obedience as an example this time.